Bob Miller for The New York Times. As the UAL misconduct scandals continue to unfold, our gender team is providing updates and analysis on the coverage and conversation in a new newsletter. Today, Audra D.S. Burch, who writes about hate crimes and social issues, weighs in on black women voters in Alabama. Sign up here to receive future installments of the MeToo Moment, and tell us what you think at nytgender@nytimes.com. In the hours after Doug Jones was declared the winner in Alabama's special Senate election and the now ubiquitous exit poll charts were splashed across television screens, Twitter churned out its latest hashtag, Black Women. By the next morning, the phrase was trending, with a seeming chorus of liberal gratitude to black women for, as the narratives goes, rescuing America from the clutches of Roy Moore. Or, as others pointed out, smartly voting their own interests. It was like a church revival and neighborhood block party rolled into one joyous national celebration, as the Los Angeles Times put it. Indeed, black women, a reliably Democratic voting bloc in Alabama and across the United States, stood strong in the MeToo era, rejecting a candidate accused of stalking malls looking for teenage girls, and sending the state's first Democrat to the Senate in a quarter century. Fully 98% of them voted for Doug Jones, up from 95% who voted to re-elect President Obama in 2012, according to exit polls back then. This week's exit polls are interesting to unpack. Overall, 57% of Alabama women backed Mr. Jones, compared with 42% of men, a significant gender gap. Among white women, 63% supported Mr. Moore, which at first blush suggests they were not hugely moved by the allegations of UAL misconduct. Meanwhile, 34% of white women voted for Mr. Jones, more than twice the percentage who cast ballots for Mr. Obama 5 years ago. That's a big shift, seismic in political terms, of one demographic group voting for a member of the other party. And consider this: 72% of white men supported Mr. Moore, a 9-point spread between white men and white women in 2012. The Republican candidate, Mitt Romney, got 84% of white men and 83% of white women, a statistically insignificant margin. As a black female journalist who has written about race and its ever-present role in social, political and economic issues, I have been thinking about the lessons of this election, but also listening to others who are helping to shape the conversation. Yes, the black women's vote was perceived by many women on the left as a moment worth celebrating. But what's next looms larger. As Kamala Harris, the second African-American woman ever elected to the United States Senate, pointed out in a tweet, black women helped elect a Democrat to the U.S. Senate and now for the first time in more than 20 years. But we need to do more than congratulate them. Let's address issues that disproportionately affect black women, like pay disparity, housing underrepresentation in elected office. Kamala Harris at Kamala Harris Dec. 13, 2017. It raises questions we are only just beginning to answer. What is the cost of political loyalty? How does voting muscle translate into support for issues important to black women? Will this trigger a reckoning among the feminist movement, often accused of dismissing or ignoring the voices and work of minorities? Then Democratic candidate for U.S. Senate Doug Jones with supporters before speaking at a fish fry campaign event in Birmingham last month. Drew anger. RJT Images. What we're reading just bit good. A national correspondent for The Times was on the ground in Alabama, talking to female voters outside a polling place in Gadsden, a city of about 36,000 people. Depending on one's point of view, she wrote, Tuesday's election was a referendum on decency, a test of the credibility of the news media, or a rallying cry against outside interference in Alabama politics. But it was also the first election in the MeToo era and a measure of the deep divide among women over personal issues like UAL harassment, religion and race. Also in the Times, the editorial board noted that, in Alabama, sanity reigns, while Lori Goodstein, who covers religion, reported on the resulting soul-searching among evangelical Christians. In HuffPost, Julia Craven wrote that the turnout among black women was not just magic, but the result of prolonged hard work in the election's lead-up by organizers who were largely female. Anna North argued in a Vox column that the MeToo movement, and feminism in general, must recognize the leadership of black women, while Fortune's Ellen McGirt offered suggestions that people could do beyond thanking black female voters, like understanding maternal death rates, intimate partner violence, and equal pay. A voter outside polling station in Dothan, on Tuesday. Audra Melton for The New York Times. What people are saying. One thing that was made clear on Tuesday is that for the first time we've seen that the idea of traditional feminism, of just fighting for women's rights, doesn't really resonate. We need to have conversations about race, we need to have conversations about class, we need to understand the linkage between those things to dismantle ideas of patriarchy, misogyny, racism and capitalism, and what autonomy and self-determination needs to look like for women. Rep. Ilhan Omar, Democrat of Minnesota, and the country's first Somali-American legislator. I feel a combination of things: pride, exhaustion, rage and a sense of heightened resilience, which is pretty much like every other day as a black woman in America. Rebecca Carroll, editor of special projects at the public radio station WNYC and critic at large for the Los Angeles Times. Black women have been showing up for years for the Democratic Party. They have long been a key voting bloc, but only recently has that power been recognized. It's high time for more than lip service, that real resources are injected into the African American community. Simone Sanders, a strategist for Priorities USA, a Democratic super PAC. I'm very proud of black women. I'm always proud of black women. But I wish that non-black people would stop treating the resiliency and strength that we've been forced to cultivate through generations of trauma and abuse as a natural resource they can mine whenever they need to. Real appreciation for black women looks like action. Ijeoma Oluo, author of the forthcoming So You Want to Talk About Race. Thanks for reading. Sign up here to receive future installments of the MeToo Moment, and tell us what you think at nytgender@nytimes.com.